All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hope you're all having a great time. We've had so many great talks so far, and we still have a full agenda of more great talks and keynotes by incredible speakers. My name is Alejo Romano, and today I'm here to talk to you about creativity in the age of overquantification, and I hope you find it interesting. Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been a designer for almost 18 years now. I've worked in small-scale boutique firms, startups, large-scale corporations like Accenture or WPP for multiple Fortune 500 clients. I've been a design manager for Softvision for almost 3 years now. I'm working out of Buenos Aires, Argentina for the Latin America region. And we are proudly one of the largest product design teams in the network, and we're still growing. So before I begin, this talk has, two underlying arguments, which I will try to tackle in the following order. The first is that having an absurd amount of available information hinders the progress of any system. The second is the only way out of this is creativity. So, as it says here, in this day and age, our interactions with technology generate massive amounts of data about our reality. Yet, is it somehow leading us into stagnation? Measurement is about quantification. People quantify when they need control criteria, a standard rule, a test. Control criteria is used to manage. Still, let's take a look at some of the dangers hidden in huge amounts of information. If you've never heard of Taleb before, he's a distinguished professor of risk engineering at NYU. He's also the author of The Incerto, a 5-volume philosophical essay on decision-making under uncertainty. In layman's terms, he writes about what to do in a world that we don't understand, right? This quote comes from a Wired article from 2013, where he states that big data may mean more information, but it also means more false information. He adds that the spurious statistical relationships rise to the surface, and I quote, because in large data sets, large deviations are vastly more attributable to variance or noise than to actual information, right? So researchers have the ability to pick whatever statistics can confirm their beliefs or show good results and then ditch the rest. Now, aside from what I've just mentioned, there are many other factors that can fool even the most experienced professionals, right? This essentially means that more data does not equal more knowledge, right? But having established this, then what's our way forward? This is another quote from Deming. Dr. Deming, was an American statistician. He's best known for his role as a teacher and a consultant to help boost the Japanese industry and manufacturing reputation through his 14 points for management. This is where, in his 1982 book, this quote is from his 1982 book, Out of the Crisis. He says, the most important figures that one needs for management are unknown or unknowable, but successful management must nevertheless take account of them. He's essentially asking managers to consider uncertainty in decision-making, right? This means recognizing that by nature, your data is always going to be incomplete, right? So this brings me to the other side of my first argument, right? The truth of the matter is that reality is messy, right? The VUCA acronym coined in the mid-80s by the US Army to describe the world after the Cold War suits it really well. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, if you've never heard of it. The meaning frameworks we've generated as a society through history have brought us to the present we inhabit. Yet today's world, which is an extensive conglomerate of networks interacting simultaneously, is substantially more difficult to inspect accurately in its completeness than before, right? There are still many unknowns and unknowables to discover. Luckily for us, other people have been creative enough to offer us frameworks to begin this journey of understanding. I will now try to use Visa CEO D Hawk's, former Visa CEO, chaotic spaces, to try and bring some sense to this presentation. So this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous mess, that we call reality, we can also call it chaos, right? This is where we, as inhabitants of this world, are challenged to keep up with the rapid nature of change. Globalization and the massive volume of often contradictory information we receive daily are a great example. Now, when we encounter chaos, one of the most common responses is to try and put some order in it, right? The order space we see here is where we try to create just enough stable conditions to be able to interpret the complexity that comes from chaos, right? As we move into order and farther away from chaos, we enter the realms of control. The control space is where problems and issues and their solutions are already known, straightforward and guaranteed. Of course, as we've heard from Deming and others, this place is as fantastical as Narnia or Middle-earth, right? Control at this point is an illusion, right? As you move farther into control, right, this takes you to the place of enforced equilibrium, where all the thinking has been done, plans are perfect, you're expected to keep your head down, suspend disbelief, any pushback, never ask any questions, stay in your lane, adhere to the plan, right? Stick with the program, right? At maximum, this will lead to apathy or revolt. So this takes me to the opposite side, where there's also an extreme to chaos, which is called kamos, from the Greek loss, doom, or dead, right? This place is, nothingness, absolute nothing, where everything ceases to exist, a point of no return. Sorry, take it. Okay, so enough of that somber note. Now, I want us to notice the overlaps that have formed in between spaces. In between order and control is the managed space, right? It's a place for high performance where most possibilities have been identified and prescribed. Think of a hospital's operating room where protocols and procedures are written down to a T, where there's still some place for uncertainty to cave in, but you've perfected your methods enough to mitigate the greatest known risks. This is where insurance comes in handy for any hidden risks, right? On the other hand, between kamos and chaos, we have the reactive space where crises happen and activism shines. This is also where, like the pandemic has shown us, fatigue emerges. Now, in between chaos and order is a sweet spot that holds the key for my second argument. The proactive space is where optionality is enabled, a place for non-permanence, where everything can and cannot be at the same time, a place where errors are clues and nothing's disregarded as irrelevant. It's a contemplative space where you're able to toy and tinker with ideas, not following any particular purpose or practical purpose, but curiosity on the loose, just enjoying itself. It's also an expansive place where you can start to create the frames that allow you to learn from complexity and begin sense making in a generative way, right? The outcome of this activity, right, is the generation of new knowledge, new meaning frameworks, new references for all to exist, right? This is the starting point for creativity, and I want us to deep dive into this right now. So fundamentally, what we're doing at this point is bridging chaos and order, right? We are constructing new meaning frameworks in the direction of control. And this process for change, we seek to transform, in this process for change, we seek to transform the cacophony of chaos into harmony, right? Caveat is that once you bring something into the new domain, you've effectively altered it. So you need to review and start over. If this sounds familiar, I'll give you a hint. Historical and modern methods from creative problem solving through organizational and societal innovation and product or service design follow pretty much the same principles. Models like Deming's plan, do, act, circle, John Boyd's observe, orient, decide, act loop, Stanford D School's empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, design, the design thinking model, right? Six Sigma's Demaic, Lean Startup, the Double Diamond, IDEO, Luma, IBM's The Loop, design sprint, and most of agile development flavors are out there too, right? They are all designed for generating new knowledge and look for change, right? By creating a new meaning framework that bridges existing frames of reference in their particular domains, right? So my conclusion here is that creativity is essentially the business of change, right? The beauty of the previous presentation is that even if it looks linear, it most definitely is not. I mean, what may look like chaos to me may feel like order or chaos for others, and vice versa, right? What may look like order to some may feel like control to others. It all depends on what space they feel more comfortable in. And those are essentially the frames of reference you're trying to bridge with creativity. Now, you might be asking yourself, how is creativity of any help to me? Well, again, in this modern world, almost all enterprises search for change of some sort, right? Whether it's economical, organizational, societal, right? Market share growth, ensuring better quality products for customers, scaling operations, growth and development opportunities for employees, whatever, right? This is where creativity comes in really handy, right? But how can you make most of it? If you go back to a model and think about what your everyday work looks like, pressures of every day are either reactive or managed, right? In the first case, it's easy to get addicted to the adrenaline you get from reacting to events on an hour-by-hour basis, that you most probably lose the desire or the ability to ponder problems. In the second, it's easy to get stuck into control operation mode, like zooming in on implementation of a specific solution with very narrow precision, right? So if creativity is the business of change, then how can creativity help transform business? How can we make the most of it, right? How can we, let me try and point out some tactics to achieve these results. Now, if you take a look at this, right, as I said, you've got these reactive spaces, but we are missing the proactive space, right? We usually have like the reactive space and the managed space, but you're missing the proactive space, which is the space for creativity. Let me try to very simply explain what a proactive space looks like, and you can tell me afterwards if you have this kind of space within your everyday work, right? So to make space for creativity to happen, we must allow people to enter a state of play. Play requires a defined time to begin and a defined time to end. If you have children, you've probably said this to your children, right? It also requires seclusion, right? It needs to create a space away from the pressures of ordinary work. It needs to also provide enough initial time for people's minds to quieten enough to be able to enter the state of play. One quick tip here is, humor does help to accelerate that initial state switch. Creativity also requires inputs, right? As inputs, you can provide, concrete business purposes, problems to solve, goals, spaces to explore, etc. You must also encourage, self-agency and curiosity, and incentivize exploration, experimentation, making, tinkering. Of course, we must also, as managers, stimulate the deliberate omission of domain dogma. Allow people to discover what the right problem to solve is, rather than, just directing them straight to it, right? We must free the people of any unnecessary constraints, which takes me to the next item in the list, which is risk-taking. John Cleese of Monty Python fame says, "Nothing will stop you being creative so effectively as the fear of making a mistake." This calls for suspending judgment, right? Now, let me try and tell you why. There's at least an 80% chance that ideas that emerge during this play state are not materially significant. That's your base rate, right? This percentage are what Edward de Bono calls intermediate impossibles. Ideas that in itself are impossible or highly impractical, but do spur better ideas that are possible, right? You can think of them as wobbly stepping stones on a river. They're not a great place to stop on, but they help you on your path. If you think about these ideas, they're going to be half-baked, absurd, childlike, naive, like the punchline to a bad joke, which may make you sound stupid. They may sound risque or even inflammatory. They're wild, provocative, or misfit ideas that will get you into trouble or put the most quiet members of the team into action or even light up a discussion. The important thing about these ideas is that we have to kind of offer them in sacrifice, like a prototype, and allow them to live long enough for others to analyze, right? And try to find the hidden value in them. Aside from suspending judgment, right, which is what I just explained, you must also have or enable the courage to fail. That is, look stupid for a while. Remember, we are in a play state, so this is completely normal. Of course, you don't want your failures to be critical and hinder your survival. So you're making small bets, and by doing so, you're actually hedging your ideas, right? As Shreyas Doshi says, people don't have to manifest Herculean courage, influence, action to be creative. It's our responsibility as managers to reduce this friction. So onto the final item on my creativity factors list. Here's a quote by Richard Buckminster Fuller. He says, "There's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly," right? This, in my opinion, is speaking about the time you need to spend to actually, be creative. It's not, creativity is not immediate, right? You need to take the time to soak in the problem and understand that there are possibilities, but you need to look deeper, right? So the final point in the creativity factors is maximizing pondering time. Here, I want to make a salvation, right? That the first thing is that creativity does not equal salience. By this, I mean that not all creativity necessarily stands out. Before you even, start to play, the first thing you need to know is when a decision needs to be taken. With that information, you can now comfortably defer your judgment until that time and establish your playground accordingly. Instead of going for full throttle for 6 hours in your pondering time, it's better to split that active pondering time in a series of shorter time spans. It's important to let your subconscious take over in between. You can go and be reactive or focus on implementing other things. The important thing is you remember to come back to this prescribed pondering time. Now, when you are in this state of play, when you've actually achieved to be in the state of, there's nothing important, just play, you must learn to tolerate the discomfort and anxiety of not actually solving a problem, right? In other words, if you just follow your first impulse only to get over that internal agitation, you'll most probably end up with subpar results, right? Again, creativity that doesn't necessarily stand out. This is where unconformity comes in really handy. So if you think about creative people, they're going to be nonconformists. Remember, you're looking for ideas that can survive the passage of time, not ideas that will look creative now or salient now, but will lose their appeal in like the next 10 seconds. So with enough active and passive pondering time, eventually serendipitous discoveries emerge, right? Of course, starting is the most important part of the creative process, because when you start, you create either something good or something bad. If you don't start, you create nothing. But you also need to, allow the process to evolve, to emerge like a fine soup, right? Okay, so this is it for creativity factors. I have one last point that I want to make about how creativity can help build, high performance teams. John Cleese says, creativity is not a talent, it's a way of operating. To me, this means that while for some this is second nature, anyone can be creative if shown the correct path. Now, back to this model, a high-performance creative team is one that can quickly adapt to enable change. It has vision, skills, incentives, resources, and a plan. If miss any one of these, and you get confusion, anxiety, resistance, frustration, or false starts. Now, a team needs to mature from chaos to order, and this is a creative process. This means it's up to management to make sure the team is trained in the necessary skills and provide the necessary incentives and resources to play out the team's plan and vision. A high-performing team is one that can recognize when they are or need to be in any of the modes, right, and respond accordingly to fulfill their vision. In any mode, the team must learn to be patient and not get caught in the anxieties they bring, right? Again, it's the same model over and over. You should not expect high performance to show out of the blue. It can take multiple iterations and changes in between to achieve it. You can think of a team as a living system, right? From this, it follows that at least some of the traits that you observe in the team members are, rational adaptations to the events they went through. So one cannot direct a living system, right? You can only disturb it. So you need to create those events yourself. As a manager, we cannot assume that a particular input will produce a particular output, right? So again, experimentation, rapid learning, and seizing the momentum of success is a better approach. While leaders will actually provide the vision and establish the context, solutions to ongoing challenges are generated by the people who are closest to the action, right? Again, if you're still thinking of your team as a system, you need to think that the performance depends not on this that I've just told you, but on the interaction between their parts. This is your main point of focus. Those interactions will eventually affect the way the system behaves and how the system achieves its purpose, right? A high-performing system can handle a certain level of uncertainty by enabling its parts to learn when needed and act accordingly for the system to achieve its purpose, right? So again, high performance is not a hiring issue. It's cultural, right? It's creative in the sense a manager needs to generate a common reference framework for adaptations to really happen, right? Hiring the best people will not give you the best company automatically. You can think about it this way. If you hired an expert crew to analyze the best parts from 100 cars, could you assemble all those parts together and create the best car? Well, probably not, because the parts won't necessarily fit together. They're coming from different platforms. And even if they did, you wouldn't expect them to be able to work together immediately, right? Same goes for teams. If you put the greatest footballers in a single team, would you achieve high performance immediately? This is my final point, right? Achieving high performance does require domain experience, quality standards, and training, and a lot of decisions and actions. But it also does require attractive and engaging communications, a clear purpose, like creativity. What does the world need from our team? Enough familiarity to enable dialogue. That's a common reference framework. Once familiarity is enabled, dialogue is enabled, and dialogue allows searching for these purposeful interactions that I was mentioning before, right? And the last part is, the other part a great team needs is observing and orienting, right? It's continuous learning to look out for improbable but high impact situations, continuous learning to understand what what your risks are and how you can be effective at mitigating those risks. All right, so these are the key takeaways from my talk today. The first one is that more data does not equal more knowledge. Creativity is the business of change. Creativity comes from play. A creative culture is experimental and open to risk. Salience and novelty require maximizing pondering time, and team performance is not intuitive and requires purposeful interactions. Right. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. If you have any questions, right now, I think we can open the questions. Okay, so we've got a question here. It says, a lot of times organizations are forever stuck in the reactive space, trying to catch up, always responding to what's happening, instead of transitioning to proactive managed areas. How do you suggest organizations undertake that shift, knowing it can be very difficult to switch organizational culture? What steps should be considered to start, and how is Lionel Messi part of that plan? Lionel Messi is going to be your inspiration. That's the first question I can answer. I think, again, the answer is creativity, right? The answer is allowing people to enter that state of play. The answer is, if you're not allowing people to enter that state of play where they are, separated from their everyday pressures, you're gonna keep the same things are going to keep happening, right? Everybody's going to be either in high performance mode or the expectation of high performance mode, where you're just narrowing on implementing. And on the other side, you're going to be reacting to whatever happens. It's addictive. It's like your brain turns to love that, right? Okay, so if we don't have any more questions so far, then I think thank you all for being here, and see you next time.